Hey, it's Nicole at The Pearl Review. How are you? For those who do follow my channel, I hope this is a nice change up since there's no bright glare on my glasses in this room. Today I am excited to talk about a fantastic anthology that came out just a few weeks ago called Are Women on the Ground? These essays were written by women who are either Middle Eastern or of Middle Eastern descent, and are journalists who are writing on the region. As Soraya Sarhadi Nelson pointed out in her own review, she mentioned that this is actually a very small pool of people. There's not a lot of women who come from these places or descend from families that are from these places that are journalists. And a lot of these essays were translated from Arabic into English. So it was a monumental, labor of love for this book to even be published, for it to even exist. The editor spent years compiling stories and following journalists. So I really enjoyed this book a lot, even though it obviously was a very upsetting book. You learn a lot about different wars and places that are going through a lot of severe hardship. Obviously, also there's a lot of beautiful things about this work as well. The Middle East is not a monolith, and this book is, definitely a reminder of that. The book ranges in tone, topic, and region. We hear stories from all over, from Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, Algeria. We hear from Egypt, Gaza Strip. We hear from Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Saudi Arabia. I believe we hear from Afghanistan, which is probably not a surprise for a Western audience. The diasporic experience of Muslims in France, and also the Syrian refugee diaspora as well. There's definitely some awkward things that this book also brings up because, as an American, there are a lot of unfortunate things that, Americans have been complicit in or have directly influenced, situations within the Middle East. And at least one of the journalists does directly address that, her being I believe Canadian or American, and navigating that, being of a sort of dual nationality or a dual identity. So this book is incredible, and I really can't give it much justice other than to tell you to read it and to give you some of my favorite passages from this book. That I have in the subsequent clips.
The journalistic norm of keeping a distance with your sources is, to me, an abstract concept, as removed from reality as living alone on an island. My sources are my schoolmates, relatives, and family members. And those death counts flashing on your screens contain my first lovers, teachers, neighbors, and friends. Once, when I happened to mention the moon landing in casual conversation, an Iraqi colleague interjected to make sure that I knew it didn't really happen. Stunned, I asked everyone else in the room if they believed the moon landing was faked. They all did, sending me a video explaining the camera angles as proof. Growing up in Canada, I had always been inclined to believe that government officials generally told the truth. But in the kaleidoscope world of Saddam Hussein's Iraq, people had reason to believe the opposite. This skepticism spilled over into a belief that most things were not the way they seemed. It could be hard to persuade Iraqis of a point of view most Westerners took for granted. Iraqis came to believe that the carnage was what Americans had intended all along, that it was part of a plan to destroy the country. It was difficult to persuade them that the even more frightening alternative was true, that there never was a plan for anything, just assumptions, miscalculations, and the fatal combination of ignorance and arrogance. When I would try to argue from my Western perspective that, however misguided, the Iraq War wasn't a conspiracy to destroy Iraq, my Arab friends would often look at me with pity.
This book is also remarkable in terms of the generosity of its contributors. The reporters kind of cover the gray areas and embarrassing moments of war as well. One of the women described being so desensitized to war. I think she's in Syria and she has blood on her car. And it's from a child who was injured nearby. The child was still living, but she is callously wiping her car of the blood while on the phone discussing with her friend where they want to go to lunch. So there's some, kind of stomach churning moments. There's moments where the reporters talk about deep grief. One of the reporters lost her husband. I think that's the first essay in the book. Also, obviously, many of these women had huge hurdles they had to overcome to even write the stories that they did, to report them, to survive the situations that they did. Many of these women are so incredibly brave, and all of them are inspiring and moving. All in all, this is a fantastic book. I really suggest you read it. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day. Bye.